What's up, MMA fans? I'm going to come also do UFC Fight Night 11 predictions here. And this card's been pretty injury-riddled since its inception. First, it was Spencer Fisher off the card against Din Thomas because of a staph infection that kind of riddled Team Milicic there. Cost Drew McFederi's a fight. Also hindered Tim Sylvia a little bit in his comeback. Mike Swick's also off the card. He was slated to fight Jonathan Goulet. His debut at the 170 weight class, and he had to pull out due to injury. And that fight was also pulled off the main card due to Swick's popularity versus Dustin Hazlett. So it was just really unfortunate for the card, but still has some intriguing matchups. We're going to get to see Nate Diaz in his first true blue 100% UFC setting. Not that he didn't win the Ultimate Fighter, which he did. It was just kind of sad to see Gambaryan lose due to injury, and Diaz took advantage. Also, interesting fight on this card I'll get to in a second. Kenny Florian and Din Thomas, and that's going to be a really, really good fight. I think UFC did well to get Florian secured for this fight to replace Spencer Fisher, who's I'm actually kind of happy because I'm going to get to see him fight at UFC 78 here in Newark, New Jersey, so that against Frankie Edgar. And even though Edgar's from New Jersey, I'm going to be rooting for Spencer Fisher, so hopefully we'll see a really, really great fight because he's an exciting fighter. Nevertheless, let's get right to the card. And the first fight we're probably going to get to see is a rematch. Nate Quarry in his comeback, almost a 2.5-year layoff. Last time you saw him, UFC 56 against Rich Franklin, a brutal KO loss, and he had a injury to his neck or his back. He had a spinal surgery, unfortunately, and it cost him quite a bit of time, as those injuries will. And he had a vertebrae fused, believe it or not, and has been on the long road to recovery. And that's another irony, me being a Buffalo Bill fan, just a football fan in general, thoughts and prayers have to go out to Kevin Everett, who sustained a similar, not a similar, but much more devastating injury, and probably, unfortunately, from everything I've heard today, won't walk again. And that's really unfortunate, and I think that's something we have to all take into account when we watch sporting events like mixed martial arts and football, is that anything could happen at any given point in time. You got to really feel fortunate that Ricardo Arona was able to walk again after the slam by Rampage, or even Fedor was able to walk again after the slam by he suffered from Randleman. So it's really puts things in perspective when you see injuries and see these kind of things happen. But Quarry was able to recover from his injury, and now he's back in the octagon, and he's fighting Pete Drago Sell, and it was his first fight after the Ultimate Fighter, the original season. He came in, he couldn't compete on the show due to injury, and he fought Pete Sell that night and won. And the funny thing about it is, the irony here is that Cecil Peoples was the referee, and like just this past Saturday's card, it was a very controversial stoppage where Quarry caught Sell with a punch, knocked him down, then followed up with another punch, but even before he was following up with that punch, you could already tell Cecil was going to stop the fight. He ran in and just jumped on Quarry's back, and he's like, I'm stopping it. And then you see Pete Sell saying, why? And it was a very, very shady stoppage as well. If any of you fans can go back and see that fight, definitely check it out. Let me know what you think about that fight. But Cecil's definitely, his track record's not looking too good. This fight, however, a rematch, it's a very intriguing fight because Quarry hasn't fought in 2.5 years, coming off that kind of injury. Pete Sell has lost his last 3 fights. That includes one on the show against Travis Lutter, lost against Scott Smith, where he got KO'd coming in after a body shot he gave to Smith. Then he lost his last fight against Paulus Litis at UFC 69. So this is really going to be a tough fight to see. I'd have to lean towards Sell because he's just been more active and he's been in the octagon a lot more as of late, even though Corey beat him, so to speak, in their previous fight. But I lean towards Sell in this fight just because of the fact that he's been fighting, more. His activity level, he'll probably win this fight maybe by a decision. He's a brawler though, so you never know. Corey could catch him and knock him down again and maybe finish him. So we'll have to see what happens. But I'm leaning towards Sell in this fight. But I'm rooting for Corey because of his comeback from his injury. Now on to the next fight, also intriguing. Chris the Crippler Leben against Terry Martin. Both guys going in opposite directions. Martin coming off a really big win against Ivan Salivary, and Leben that same night lost against Caleb Starnes in a performance. He's kind of 1-3 in his last 4 fights, whereas Martin's kind of done well at the 185 since dropping down from 205. And this looks like it's going to be a really good fight. They got some good stand-up. Leben's going to look to brawl as he normally does, and I think Terry Martin's going to use his wrestling a little bit more in this fight and try to take Leben down and stop him on the ground. Because I think Martin's a very, very good wrestler, and he kind of knocked Salivary out with a slam in his last fight. So I think he'll look to take this fight to the ground and try to finish Leben there. Leben is very, very tough. He's a hard guy to finish, even though Anderson Silva did it. That's still Anderson Silva. So, and Martin does hit pretty hard. This fight, it's going to be a very tough fight. It's very much a clash of styles. Guys similar in certain ways. Shorter, more compact, stout 185ers as opposed to the taller, rangy 185ers. I'd have to lean toward Martin though in this fight because it's just more momentum. He's fought good competition, so has Leben, but Martin's just done better as of late, and I think his confidence will push him through in this fight. You just got to kind of wonder if I think the recent legal problems he's had has affected his training or his mental state for this fight, so Leben could take advantage of that, but leaning towards Martin in this fight, probably a decision, 3rd round decision. If not, if he gets into the ground, and maybe he could finish him, but Leben's a tough guy to stop, so Martin, I don't know about his submission game too much. If he did have one, I'd maybe say submission, but I'm leaning towards him probably getting a decision in this fight. Now on to the next fight. Junior Asakuno, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. So I'm one time previously in the UFC against Nate Diaz, and this is going to be a good fight, I believe. Nate Diaz, this is his first, time the UFC. This, all the fanfare from the show and the finals is over. Now it's on to the UFC and the career of an Ultimate Fighter and everything that comes with that. He's, like most guys who, like his predecessors, they'll fight lower name competition after they win the show. They're kind of spoon-fed a little bit. But this should be a good fight because Diaz doesn't really have a lot of MMA credentials. He did look impressive on the show, but I mean, the toughest guys he has fought is probably Hermes Franco, which he lost via armbar, Koji Uishi, which his brother beat back at UFC 53 by knockout, he lost to as well. So Diaz is just really pretty much an infant in the sport as well, and still starting his career, as well as Junior is. So this should be a really good fight. Junior does have a good win against Dustin Hazlett though, so that's a pretty good name to have under your win belt. But Diaz trains with his brother, who's also getting ready for a fight this weekend, Jake Shields, who's getting ready for a fight, so he's being prepped very, very well at Cesar Gracie Academy, and I think that Diaz will probably win this fight. He showed really, really good transitions on the ground on the show, and even his stand-up, kind of like his brother's, not quite as complete with the kicks yet, but his punching style very, very similar, and his ground game looks very, very good in terms of the hip movement on the ground and the transitions into and out of different submissions. So I pick him to win this fight via submission, 1st or 2nd rounds. More the 2nd. I think the 1st round will be a feeling out process, more or less, and Nate Diaz submission, 2nd round. Now to the main event, which should be a pretty damn good main event. I think the UFC did pretty good to get this main event cleaned up after Spencer's injury. Ken Florian against Dean Thomas. This is definitely now another one of these fights where you could say the winner could be in line for a 155 title shot, depending on what happens, or just in that picture, more or less. Again, Both fighters, good stand-up. Kenny he's got a, like, especially from the first season, I think he, out of all those guys, believe it or not, was the most improved from that point till now. And that's completely cardio, ground game, stand-up, especially stand-up. And for a guy that fought 30 pounds above his weight class that he's competing now, that's even more unprecedented. So I would have to say that Kenny has been the most impressive and the most improved since his stead on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter. And he's fighting Din Thomas, a UFC veteran who's took some time off, then came back to compete on the show. And since then, he's on a pretty good winning streak. Beaten Clay Guida, Jeremy Stevens. He's a really good fighter, a seasoned guy who's fought Matt Sarah, BJ Penn. He's fought, the who's who at that weight class, and he's a big 155er too. So this is a really good fight. Ken Flo, of course, I think he has an edge on the ground, even though Dan has some good submission skills and some really good stand-up. This fight is really torn on this fight. This is a very hard fight to call, and I think it'll definitely be a war of attrition, more or less, like who can push the fight and make the other guy, mentally collapse. That's what I think it's going to come down to, because skill level, they're very equal, even though I think Kenny has a submission advantage and a grappling advantage. I think Dan has a good solid base in the stand-up, slight advantage in the stand-up, and cardio will definitely be key, as in all fights. I have to lean toward Kenny Foran in this fight, probably by maybe a second round stoppage, because he's just really outside of the Sean Shirk fight, which he even impressed me in that loss because he took so much damage and just really was able to keep going in spite of all the takedowns and the slams and just the constant pressure Shirk will put on you. And in spite of all that, was able to just go the whole 5, and that's impressive in itself. He's showed a lot in his last fight against a big 155er as well, Alvin Robinson. So I think that he'll win this fight in the second round, probably by a ground and pound stoppage. So bold prediction, but that's why it's prediction. I hope you guys enjoyed this segment and enjoyed the upcoming MMA we got this weekend. You got Elite XC show, then this following show, I believe it's Wednesday or Thursday, and then UFC 76. So until then, you guys have a good one. And I want to thank everybody again for all the views and comments and stuff, and the notes you send. I really appreciate everything. It's really cool to get to converse with all you guys out there about MMA and all the stuff that's going on. So until then, hope everybody's well, and take care.